You stretch your arms high as you step into the spot on your wooden floor where the last rays of sunshine landed. The remaining warmth of the day was still enough to tickle your skin. You felt pleasantly full from dinner, and the only thing that was left on your plate was waiting for a knock. Derek closed your door as he came in behind you. You'd gotten to spend the afternoon together, and you knew his mom would arrive to pick him up any minute. Thanks for having me over, Faye. You're welcome. It was nice that you wanted to do the dishes for everyone, even though my mom's work still made Elizabeth take her turn. Derek pressed his palms together, flipping each hand over and under in a loop. It could almost be viewed as a mock washing gesture, but he was probably being awkward. I just thought it'd be fair. I didn't help with the cooking. You're so sweet. Oh, thanks. Oh, Derek, Mr. Manners. But before you could settle in enough to even take a seat, a pounding set of thuds cracked the laid-back mood. Derek scrunched his limbs totally inward from the shock. You'd been keeping an ear out for that exact sound, but it was completely unnecessary. Tourists halfway across town wouldn't miss that blare. The racket was followed by the door Derek had so carefully closed moments ago, roughly swinging open. Obviously, the person on the other side wasn't Mrs. Suarez. It was your older sister. With a huff and an eye roll, she delivered a brief message as fast as she could spit it out. Derek's mom's here, and our mom made me come get you about it. Okay, we're coming. She gave you another roll of her eyes, but didn't waste a single extra word on you. In one motion, she curled her fingers over the edge of the door, twisted around, and yanked the door shut. The books and boxes on your desk shelves shook. Derek's teeth clattered too. He whispered through the grimace, "Man, I'm sorry for that." "No worries, it's not your fault." She sometimes gets extra grouchy. Derek's shoulders slowly eased down into their resting position, but his expression was pinched. He began to whisper while glancing the way your sister went. His voice was hushed, secretive, almost afraid Elizabeth might slap the door open again and find out he was talking about her. "Do you think it's about the dishes, or I don't know?" You could only give a half-hearted answer. You struggled to understand why Elizabeth acted out the way she did a lot of times. "But your mom is waiting. We've gotta go so you can get home." "Right, Faye?" Derek's mouth opened and closed without saying anything else. He lifted a hand to try gesturing, but dropped that without it going anywhere. It made you raise your eyebrow. "Yeah?" His bright green eyes squinted hard into narrow slits, but you could still see the way they darted around. His gaze was trained on the ground, scanning across the floorboards through everything that really mattered was probably inside
Well,
his actual head. I was wondering. He paused again. Derek's hands balled into tight fists. He let out a breath and finally asked a question. Are you busy tomorrow? You blinked. That was all? No? The simple answer still made Derek flinch. It might not be all. Really?
Really?
I think so. Why? Then he spread his fingers and arms out in not quite a shrug. Would you want to come over to my house for the day? The tone of voice and pose he took was casual and scripted way. He definitely wanted you to feel like it was totally optional and no problem if you turned him down. You couldn't tell if that was the end or just another point in a process, but you were going along for the ride. I can probably do that. I'd have to ask my mom's. Derek leaned in closer, slowly opening his eyes wider. Some kind of suspense was growing. Alright, alright. He dipped his head in tiny, repetitive nods. Oh, the look on his face went distant again, the way it did when he was thinking deeply. Then finally, he flung his hands up to complete the shrug and spoke the question he'd been stalling on. Would you wanna come over tonight instead of would you wanna come over tonight instead and sleep over? We could like camp out in my living room. It'd be fun, like our own little party. Now you are the one feeling nervous. I know that's pretty out of nowhere. If you can't make it or don't wanna or anything, I'm totally cool with it. I want to. Hopefully my moms will let me. Awesome. Come on, we'll ask right now. Yeah, definitely. My mom is waiting for us. The two of you left your bedroom and bounced down the stairs one after the other. Your warm greeting came as you hit the landing point on the first floor.
Hello.
Hello, Derek and Faye. Your two moms and Derek's one mom were gathered in the entryway of the living room. Derek reached a hand out towards her and waved it. Hey, Mom. You gave a wave of your own, keeping your hand closer to your chest. After smiling at him, at you, Derek's mom turned her head over her shoulder to speak to your parents. Thank you again for taking care of him. We, Mom? Derek uncharacteristically broke polite decorum by interrupting his mom. It got her attention and she let him speak. I had something I wanted to ask you and Mrs. Madison. Oh, what is it, sweetie? He had the attention and encouragement of all three moms. On this stage, Derek didn't beat around the bush the way he did before. I was wondering if they could come with me and spend the night at my house, please. He knew your moms well enough to foresee potential concerned reactions, and so Derek sped through his extra terms to make sure they heard that part before answering. We'd set up in the living room instead of my room, and my parents and brothers would still be around. People could keep an eye on us. As expected, Mom and Ma weren't instantly thrilled. They were shocked by the possibility. And while he was successful in avoiding the first obvious pitfall, your mom still had a completely different apprehension to fret about it. That's pretty last minute. You're about to walk out the door. We couldn't have Faye impose. Derek's mom stayed strangely silent. After he popped the question, she fixed a stare at her son, crossed her arms against her chest, and shook her head at him. But the shake didn't mean no. It had another meaning that maybe only a Suarez could get it. Still, she smiled.
Yes.
We can find a place for Faye tonight if there's no family conflict with that, and she would like to come over, of course. Both of your moms turned their faces right towards one another on instinct. They were astounded that Derek's mom didn't mind. Huh. Mom scratched her head over it. Derek had made a huge request with no advanced warning, and Mrs. Suarez had 3 children to care for already. It seemed unreasonable to her. For your ma, however, a light began to sparkle in her eyes, and when she noticed you looking, she held your gaze. Faye, do you want to go? Timidly, you nodded, and yes was what you meant. Ma wrapped both her arms around one of her wives. I see. I think that would be alright, just this time. Really? Your mom sputtered. She clearly hadn't gotten to that page of the script. Mom got an encouraging pat on the top of her hand for her troubles. She remained absolutely perplexed, mouth open, eyes wide. Mom could only process enough to realize that she'd become the odd mom out. She probably didn't know exactly why she was doing it, but Mom turned to look at you. Pack it up, Faye. You wouldn't want to keep them waiting. You snapped your gaze to Derek. He'd done the same. The two of you shared a matching look of astoundment. It was almost identical to the gesture your moms had made when Mrs. Suarez first accepted Derek's proposal. Thank you, Mrs. and Mrs. Madison. Thanks, Moms. The deal was finalized with a crisp clap from Mrs. Suarez. Pamela is right. You should get what you'll need for the night. You're coming along for the ride. I'll help. Neither of you gave them time to change neither of you gave them time to change their minds. You ran back to your room and began to pack in a whirlwind. As you shoved clothes into a backpack, Derek hovered in the center of the room. He fidgeted with his energy, and that was going unused. Can you get me a spare toothbrush? There's extra for traveling in the hall closet. Gotcha. He was gone in a flash. You made sure to get the basics and something you personally couldn't go without. your favorite stuffed animal. Derek returned in a sprint, a toothbrush held out over his head in triumph. With a grin, you threw it into the overnight bag. That was enough to get you by for a short trip. You zipped it up, hooked it around your shoulder, and went out the door. You checked off the final requirements to leave. For the second time in a matter of minutes, you rushed down your stairs in a flurry of steps with Derek close enough that you almost stumbled into him. At the bottom, you came to stand in front of your mom group. We're ready. Perfect. Good luck, kiddos. Have a good time. Gently, rhythmically, Ma ran her hand over your hair. All her precious hopes for your safety and happiness ebbed from her fingertips into you. Good night, Faye. Take care. Okay, bye, moms. Mrs. Suarez and Derek gave their own goodbyes, and afterwards they returned to the minivan that had brought them here. And then, almost unbelievably, you slid into the vehicle with them to go on the impromptu sleepover. The chill of the squeaky leather against your heads and the persistent smell of animal cracker crumbs kept you grounded in reality. Derek bounced against the seat back like a kid on a roller coaster and clicked his belt into place for the ride back to his condo. You strapped in too. You never could have imagined the evening taking you down this literal and metaphorical road, but you were eager to find out what happened next. The sun continued to sink as Derek's mom drove down the highway. When you arrived at your destination, so had night. The condo complex was nicely lit and well maintained. The three of you easily made your way up to Derek's house and went right in. Slipping her set of jangling keys onto a nearby wall hook, Mrs. Suarez called out into the hall from the empty living room. We're home. You braced your ears for the second sibling caused commotion of the evening that you knew would come. Derek's back. Nicholas tore out of his bedroom and thundered across the floor until he had his arms gripped around his big brother's legs. Even with all the force 60-year-old Nicholas could muster, it was hardly a bump against Derek. He absorbed the impact calmly, giving his little sibling a pat on the head for his troubles. Yeah, we're back. The two remaining boys of the family came from the same room at a snail's pace in comparison to the firsts, but soon enough, Mr. Suarez and George were with you too. Welcome home. George rubbed a growing sleepiness from one eye. He took in the scene with undisguised confusion. Why is Faye here? I'm sleeping over. What? Mom? She answered matter-of-factly. Faye is staying over with us tonight. George clamped his mouth shut. He might have had something to say about the spur-of-the-moment plans, but obedient enough to not argue with his mother. Mr. Suarez, however, had a childlike glee in his expression. Oh, very good. Derek cut into his dad's excitement with a reply a little too soon. He had completely normal words to say, but it'd been put on fast forward. Yeah, it's great. Thanks, Dad. Anyway, we're gonna camp out in the living room. Can we borrow the tent? Derek's hands were balled into fists and held up near his collarbone overzealously, kind of protectively. His father looked down at him with a familiar, serene expression. You knew exactly where you'd seen it before when Mr. Suarez placed his hand on the top of Derek's head. He took care of Derek the same way Derek cared for Nicholas, of course. And the gesture worked the exact same charm on Derek. His shoulders relaxed, his expression softened shyly. The pounding nerves that had been building faded. Camping? Nicholas shouted without warning. The entire exchange had held no interest for the youngest one until the moment. That's right, Nickel. Derek reached down and carefully placed his hands on Nicholas's shoulders to nudge him off. Nicholas went willingly, giddily, repeating the same word, this time in an amazed confirmation rather than a question. Camping. With a thumbs up, Derek stood tall. The plan was in motion. Faye, you can put your bag down and sit if you want to. I'll go grab some other stuff. When moving past you, Derek took a second to lean in and whisper a light-hearted reassurance.
It's okay.
The little bros will go to bed before we do, and Mom is going to be watching them tomorrow. You're not here to babysit the whole time again. You answered with a quick nod. The whole group broke off into 3 sets. Derek ran to his room with Nicholas right on his heels, while Mr. and Mrs. Suarez left the space to the kids, returning to their own bedroom. You and George stayed wherever you were. George shuffled over to the kitchen counter to sit on a bar stool. He wasn't helping, but he wasn't getting in the way. George was more sensitive than he let on, and you made sure to smile reassuringly over at him so he knew he was wanted there. His lips quirked up just a little in response. Then you took your own seat on the couch and got to unpacking. The first thing you pulled out of your bag was your stuffed animal. You placed that on the coffee table for safekeeping. You kept busy sorting through it all until Derek returned with the goods. 2 pillows were under each of his arms. He had a few brightly patterned blankets draped over his shoulders, and the rope loop of a big nylon pack was hooked around one wrist. Nicholas supported the effort by carrying one long pillow. He clutched it tight to his chest as best he could, considering the pillow was about as long as his whole torso. Derek piled up the supplies on the opposite side of the couch from where you were. Nicholas opened his arms wide to let his pillow drop to the floor in a soft puff. It made Derek chuckle proudly.
Okay.
I'm gonna put together the tent. Nicholas, George, do you want help? I'll help. I'm gonna go together the tent. Nicholas bounced around Derek in absolute eagerness. In the distance, George pushed away from the counter. Yeah. His expression was flat and wide-eyed, but there was hopeful rise in his voice as he caught up the bar stool. You quietly went to the stand by the Suarez brothers. Let's do it. The declaration made you, Derek, Nicholas, and George get to work making heads and tails of the tent. Derek yanked open the cinched in top of the pack while he walked to the furthest spot in the living room. Everyone followed his lead. He pushed the semicircle basket chair up against the edge of the counter wall so the tent could go there instead. Derek dumped the contents of the bag onto the cream rug. He leaned over on one foot while kicking the other in the air to reach over and grab the instructions that fell out with the rest of the materials. He scanned over these steps briefly, but it was only a refresher. Derek was able to get right into the process. Nicholas was assigned pole control. He kept watch on the pile, not letting any roll away, and would pass the tent legs over when they were needed. Stretching the fabric out took the rest of you. George and Derek each grabbed a side and tugged. Derek had to squeeze himself against the tall potted plant in the corner. He snickered at the way the leaves curled around his face. Despite that, you got the tent laid out across the ground. The first time Nicholas got to pass a pole, it slapped against the wall in the tiny space you were working in. George covered his ears and ducked. Derek snatched the end out of the air before it could do more damage. The little boy promised to be more careful. He got to keep his job and took it seriously. Piece by piece, the project slowly took shape until it was finally complete. The small light gray tent sat in its full form, nestled into the nook of the living room.
Good job, team.
All right, good job, everyone. As if he'd yelled into a cave, an echo of his words followed after. Good job. Nicholas threw his hands in the air with joy. George simply smiled, satisfied. Thanks for the help, everyone. Derek stuck his fist to his hips and gave the team an encouraging grin. Now we can actually do the indoor camping part of the living room camp out. Derek strolled up to the cabinet in the corner. He pulled open the translucent doors to fiddle around with something inside. A pop-wide tune blared out. He turned on a CD player. Nicholas leapt onto the couch and swung his arms in the air to dance. George swayed his shoulders to bubblegum notes. Their big brother wasn't done yet. He made a beeline for the kitchen cupboard next. This time the mood setter Derek retrieved was a pillow-sized bag of puffy marshmallows. Catch! That was the only warning before he sent the marshmallows sailing across the room in a perfect arc. George managed to snatch it from the air without a problem. The top of the bag was twisted around and sealed with a blue clip. The open side was stretched from the process of twisting and untwisting repeatedly. It had been well appreciated so far. George undid the clip and set it aside on the coffee table. His tongue pressed against the corner of his lips as he dug his hand deep into the bag for just the right one. Nicholas tilted over from the cushion and into the bag to fill his tiny fist with 2 marshmallows. He crushed them between his fingers, the fluffy connections squeezing through the cracks. It was real. It was a party. Derek put his hand on the cupboard handle and shouted to you over the music. Do you like marshmallows? Yeah, I'd like one. You grabbed one for nibbling. It wasn't something you wanted to eat most days, but this night was the right time for marshmallows. The cupboard door swung closed and nothing was there to obstruct your view of the bright grin on his face anymore. He finally joined the rest at the base camp, which was the couch at the moment. George, get me one of those too. Without even one warning, George simply flicked a marshmallow at his brother, and same as before, Derek grabbed it in midair. He bit one piece out of the top edge, chewing thoughtfully.
Okay.
There's no TV while camping, so having a sleepover movie wouldn't make sense. With the swallow of marshmallow and a snap of his fingers, Derek empathically declared a grand idea. We'll play an ad-lib game. I'll make up a story and the three of you can fill in some blanks to make it complete. George rolled a shoulder passively. He had finished his first treat and was poking around for another perfect selection. Okay? Nicholas smiled a big white smile, but it wasn't just pure pearly teeth. His entire mouth was full of marshmallow mush. You took that reaction as a yes. The little ones were on board. I don't mind. Alright, let me think. We need a noun, a thing you can drive or ride on, a shape, a color, a food, and a drink. Nicholas gulped painfully, forcing down way too much marshmallow poop all at once, but he wouldn't let anyone beat him to the punch. A truck. Nicholas's eyes were wide. He was practically vibrating from the sugar high mixed with the chance to add a truck to the story. Derek rubbed his back placatingly. That's the right, George. The middle child plucked at the frayed plastic edge of the marshmallow bag. It might have taken him longer to come up with something than the youngest, but he did contribute an idea. Blue. Cool. We've got a color, Faye. For the food, it's potato chips. Gotcha. He shifted his focus back to the boys. Derek's expression and the entire way he carried himself wasn't different when speaking to them. It reminded you of a teacher interacting with his students. George, Nicholas, give me some more words.
Oh.
Hexagon. Oh,
Nice.
good one. That's the shape. Apple juice. Perfect.
Cool.
There's a drink. Derek continued to warmly watch over his little siblings, but the words he spoke were for you. Faye, you're giving us the last one, a noun. Yeah, the noun would be us. His expression somehow softened even more. Awesome. Derek pulled his chest back and folded his arms. He smirked, brows angled and eyes squinted.
Alright.
I can now tell you the story of Baby Castle. Nicholas stamped his feet rapidly into the couch. He was absolutely squealing from the premise alone.
What?
Baby Castle? Yes, that's right. In a big open field, there was a stone fortress that was Baby Castle. Everyone who lived there was a little baby, but they didn't need any adults. Their greatest treasure was a giant golden us at the center of the courtyard. They. Maybe I should change the noun. The noun should be mask, maybe.
Alright. What?
Okay. Their greatest treasure was a giant golden mask at the center of the courtyard. They were always vigilant to protect it from the greedy hands of grown-ups. George snorted. His mouth and cheeks began to pull upwards. Then one day, someone came to the gates of the castle on their truck. It was a man, not a baby or even a kid. He had a hexagon-shaped head and a fancy top hat. He was knocking on the door, demanding to be let in. They were just babies and they needed supervision. It was a blue alert, and the guards were rushing to their stations. The first line of defense was their potato chips catapult. It was loaded up and then fired. Bullseye. The potato chips knocked the top hat off his head, but the hexagon-faced man wasn't deterred. He used his giant grown-up legs to climb over the wall. There was a panic in the castle. He had to be after their golden mask. Derek shifted his way from foot to foot with precision. His hands had gone up in front of him with his palms facing forward. He looked like the goalie of a soccer game. But the babies weren't beaten yet. The squirt gun battle line lined up, and as soon as the adult stepped foot on the other side, he was pelted with apple juice. He stumbled back, and the gatekeepers opened up the door while he was blinded. He got pushed right out and back onto his truck. The guards gave one more shove, and the man with his truck and without his hat slid down the hill and far away. The castle was saved. The babies and their masks were still free. Hooray! The end. A matching pair of cheers filled the air. Nicholas and George were thrilled by the yarn Derek and spun for them. You applauded the great conclusion of the tale of Baby Castle too. Bravo! The living room campsite blew out. Keep rolling from there. Derek turned the music up louder, making sure to skip any track that didn't fit the mood. George and Nicholas swung across the floor to dance. They threw marshmallows in the air and tried catching them with their mouths, and when they got old, they tried to see who could fit the most in their mouths at one time. Derek grew to meet feet and tapped his shoes around as he collected the treats he missed, picked up the pillows they knocked to the floor, and patted backs when their stuffed faces made them cough. But he wasn't only Mr. Responsible. Derek took his own shot at the marshmallow mouthful competition and blew his little brothers out of the water. You threw your own marshmallows into the air, and you caught some while the others ended up on the floor. They were slippery for stuff that was so sticky, but you enjoyed the challenge. As the night continued, Derek moved on from the party hotspot to chill out inside the tent. He was on his side, propped up by his elbow. It took a few minutes for Nicholas to notice his brother's disappearance from his side blinds. You knew the moment it happened. He'd been bouncing from cushion to cushion on the couch, but came to a firm stop, sticking his feet deep in place.